Welcome to another episode of the Svarim Shatter podcast. I'm Nachi Weinstein. Quick programming note for the episode that there'll be an additional episode this week, an extra episode tomorrow. It's Labor Day, and next week there is an auction on Sunday, September 7th at 1 p.m. Gnazim auction, GENAZYM.com. You can check out the catalog. And as usual with the Gnazim auction, we did an auction chatter. And so that episode of Auction Chatter discussing the Gnazim catalog with many fascinating items. There are signed documents and manuscripts of the Netiv Yehuda, the Nesivis, the Chassam Sofer, there's the Beis Meir's personal copy of Beis Meir and Even Ezer, and many more items. And you can check all of that out at Gnazim, GENAZYM.com. And so that episode will be airing tomorrow as an extra. So just a quick programming note here before the episode. To sponsor an episode on the podcast or to support the podcast, please email me svarimchatter@gmail.com or check out the link and information in the show notes. You can also find the link in the show notes to subscribe to the Svarim Chatter WhatsApp community, as well as the Svarim Chatter status. And finally, wherever you listen to the Svarim Chatter podcast, if you can please follow, rate, and review the podcast. And with that, enjoy the episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Svarim Chatter podcast. On this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be joined by Gili Backenroth, who is the mechaber of a number of Svarim. Makim Yanichu, Tabuche Zahav, which is on Rashi, Al Torah, and the newest sefer, which we'll be focusing on here today, which is titled Tafkid HaAdam Levar Chavasei V'Tafkidei Shal Kol Adam B'Olam. To talk about the purpose of man in this world, and all of this farm are Alpi Darkei Shal Rav Avram Yehuda Leib Pessin. That's all of Muncie, and we're going to talk about that. What that means, Alpi Darkei Rav Pessin. Who is Rav Pessin? So we're going to go through some of that. So thank you, Rabbi Gili, for joining me.
Yes. Good evening. Thank you for having me. How would you like to start?
So let's start off. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, my background simply is that I learned in Chaim Berlin. I then went to Cornell Law School. I then joined the firm of Hahn and Hessen, Margolis and Ryan, which was a mid-level Manhattan law firm that specialized in bankruptcy reorganizations. I became a partner there, one of the managing partners, and was a partner or associated with the law firm for 46 years. I retired 2 years ago and moved from Muncie to Lakewood, where I presently reside.
Okay, so how did you get into Svarim? That answers your personal background. But now, we're going to get into Rav Pessin. So I guess two-part question. Let's first start off with Svarim, and then we'll get to Rav Pessin. So, how did you decide you're going to become a Chabad Svarim now?
Well, we have to switch that around. The way it started is that when I moved to Muncie, it was my great privilege and schus to daven in the shul of Avraham Yehuda Pessin, Zecher Tzadik Levracha. The Rav, as we all called him, was a Goin Olam. He is one of only 5 people who ever received Yair Yad Yadin from Moshe Feinstein, which of course meant that he had a fahir, that he had to be a Baki and Gan Shas. He was an Ilui in the finest sense of the word. He was in Mir for a number of years. He also had a master's degree in mathematics, and when he came to Muncie, he created a very unique environment. I would call it a yeshiva for Balabatim. All of us who are zeichet to be as part of his kehillah were exposed to multiple shiurim that went on during the week, which exposed us to multiple layers of the Rav Zal's unique derech. And over, I would say, the 25 plus years that I was in that kehillah, I was the president of the shul for most of that time, and I was zeichet to be one of the Taimchei Torah of the Rav in those times. We all of us, the unique group of people who were attracted to him, all were zeichet to be makabel a very unique derech, and it's that unique derech that really got me started in the idea of actually writing Svarim. So we can take this really in a couple of parts. The first part, of course, is to tell you something about the Rav himself. He was an Ilui. He was a man whose derech halimud was very, very much, where he took advantage of the Chochmas HaChitzonis, the Paparos Shel Chochma, and he was able to seamlessly integrate that into an authentic derech of limud, and which, by the way, on the one hand made him quite unique, because what drove him is Torah. There's Paparish Chochma for him was really Paparish Chochma. They weren't two disciplines that ran in tandem, parallel. One was simply something that he used in order to refine his derech of limud, which we'll talk about in a moment. But one of the things that, for example, he always used to say is that Rav had a unique form of smicha which had to do with b'chayris, and the unique smicha he had was because Rav spent 6 months observing husbandry, so that he was able, in fact, to paskin these shilas. So the Rav used to say, "Das heißt gelernt." If you don't understand the factual setting of the halachas that you're being asked to paskin, you really don't understand what you're doing at all. And for that, you really do need a certain amount of chachmas chitzonis. And I would say that his kehillah was almost entirely composed of people with high IQs, with people who had major degrees in the sciences and the humanities. Those were the sort of extraordinary people who also had a certain sense of avas HaTorah, who attracted to his unique derech. So in all these years, he pretty much was not a man who led a yeshiva, although there were a couple instances where there were some false starts in that regard. But ultimately, he settled down as being the unique Morid Aser that he was. He was literally like a Ur V'Tumim. People who remember him very well in Muncie, Lamdonim would simply knock on the door and come and talk to him in Torah. And he was involved in learning 24/7. And he had a vision of actually establishing a yeshiva for Balabatim. That is, his base of medrash was not just simply a place where you learned. It was a true Chever Shas. And he intended that all of his Balabatim become serious Talmidei Chachamim. He talked to us as if we were big lamdanim. He expected us to be big lamdanim. He really believed in his kehillah, and he attracted a very unique group of people. Many of them, their children and grandchildren, became very, very serious Talmidei Chachamim, people who really were exposed to him and got a certain sense of avas HaTorah and an appreciation of the grandeur of learning that really it was his unique style. Now, so let me, without rambling too far afield, to give you some sense of his derech, because that really is at the heart of it. The fact of the matter is, when I went to one gadol, very choshev gadol, and I mentioned to him that it would be kedai to write a sefer in which I tried to explain the Rov's derech. And his response to me is, that's a grave mistake. What you need to do is write a sefer in which you apply the Rov's derech, and in the application of the derech, you will be able to get a sense of his derech. And all three svarim really are based upon that basic principle. And I will give you some sense of it so that you have some sense of what it is, but all I can give you is some sense of it without giving you the totality of the derech. This is a derech that you just don't simply learn. You experience it and you live it. It's godel shimusha milimuda. You have to see how it's applied in action. So to the question of how I started the idea of writing Svarim, first I have to explain to you something about the Rov's derech. And if I were to give you some sense of it, because Reb David Cohen actually does a decent job in his Askamas of explaining it, it really starts out with the idea of the power of words. And as we all know, that Chazal say that the Rebbeinu Shalom created the world with seer of Isiyos. These Isiyos really have to be understood as nuclear concepts. The nuclear concepts are now fused, that is, there's a spiritual fusion of these nuclear concepts into words. Those words are the Asara Ma'amaris that resulted in the materialization of the world as we know it. They are the materialization of words. The words represent the Rebbeinu Shalom's understanding of the basic building blocks of creation, And those building blocks of creation, which are themselves the tzira for Isaias, are in fact the basic principle by which the world was created. And there was Sarah Mamaris. As opposed to Aseret Dibros, which is, the Dibros is Hanhoga, as Rashi would say. Hanhoga is, it now tells me what to do with the world that was created. So Aseret Mamaris, God creates the world. He basically utters concepts. Those concepts materialize into the world that we live in. And then Dibor is the Aseret Dibros, is the Hanhoga. As Rashi says, the idea is what we do with the world that God created. Basic ideas. Now, it doesn't stop over there. So the Rov basically had this view from I believe it was from the Nefesh HaChaim, that in every word there are chavilas shel chachma. That is, a word has to be understood as a mathematical principle. The mathematical principle encompasses the totality of all the wisdom that is in the word that resulted in the Rebbeinu Shalom's creation of the world based upon that word. All right, then those words themselves now are mitzaref. That is, you take those words and they themselves fuse with other words, and we build ever more complicated concepts. So the Rov's specific derech, but really that doesn't do justice, but just to give you some sense, is that it's the power of the word. How do we understand? Let's say we take Rashi, because Rashi is a very good example. You have to take all of the instances in which a word is used, and from there you come up with a composite understanding of the totality of all of the wisdom that is ensconced in that word. And then you take the word and you're mitzaref to other words, and together they have more and more complicated concepts, and that is the way in which you go about understanding the words of Chazal, the way the Rav constructs his derech. And Rashi is a very good medium for that, which is the reason why the first two svarim are basically, because Rashi itself is the ultimate architect of words. The way you do this is you take a look at all the instances where Rashi defines a word and then you see as if they're two chemicals, spiritual chemicals that now combine, and we come up with a spiritual compound. Another part of the idea is this idea of Parsha and Inyan. And that is, with Rashi in specific, the Dibur Maskal gives me an Inyan. That is, how do I determine how these words are to be used? They are always words used within an Inyan, within a certain topic, they are conceptual. Once Rashi defines the concept, he'll give you the words that are the tziruf of the words, and then his pirush basically is you now have to define all the words, understand how those words in fact spiritually are mitzaref to each other, and with that you're able to understand the depth of what Rashi is saying. Interesting enough, if you follow this with word association, you'll see that many times Rashi was using a word which is used in certain ways in Chazal, and you'll see there's always a connection. So there is a word association concept here as well. This is just really the thumbnail, because the Rav had many rules and principles that he used. But just to give you a basic idea of this derech, it is based upon the idea of how one uses the power of words. So what the basic idea is words. You define them, you then understand how they spiritually align with each other. It's like formulating mathematical formulas based upon principles that then are amalgamated that yield certain types of results. You could use set theory. You could do it by that way and say that we have three words. Where the three words interconnect is where the tziruf is. So you'll have three words that Rashi will say, and the interconnection in terms of the definitions of the three words that interconnect will give you the tziruf Isis. That's another way of looking at it. If you looked at it from set theory, many ways of looking at it, but the bottom line is all the same. Is he started with the power of the word, and then he built on that. That is, I would say, a thumbnail understanding of his idea of the power of words. So that's where the Rav started. with that, he had many, many, many principles as one goes along through Shas, many, many principles which he developed as a result of how it is Chazal articulated, how they used the power of those words. I mean, it was very, very important to him to understand what the difference of a Meisive, what a Meiboy, what the Alibo, what is Bishlomo, all these things were him powerful ideas many times that we skip over, but in his world, these were 50% of the understanding of the Gemara was basically to understand these basic concepts. So, do you know the difference between a Hachi Kamar and a Bishloma, a Chasuri Mechsara, and etc., and a Kagon? All these things really give us the logic that Chazal use in order to explain things. That is to materialize concepts into a manner that we can understand. That is roughly a thumbnail scale understanding of what he was doing. Very, 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 very. Now, how did we get to the idea of actually writing Svarim? Well, it was my pleasure to be his Talmud of his, and I consider myself a Talmud Muvik. While I was practicing law, which was a full-time occupation, but learning in the Rov's Kehillah was also a full-time occupation. What happens actually is that the Rov passes away about 18 years ago, and 3 years after the fact, as the Kehillah was now continuing, it really dawned upon me that nothing had been written about his derech since he'd passed. And to be quite frank about it, it was very clear to me that unless something was done to, one, write Svarim according to his derech, and also to print his own Svarim, that this a unique Torah that he had was going to be lost. And what really propelled me to do this, and I will say, is it's only as there was at the time no one. For whatever reason, there was no one in a position who either had the financial ability and was privy to a derech that could be articulated in a certain way. Certainly, being a lawyer is extremely helpful for this, because I really deal with words. That is my umnus. As a matter of fact, we'll talk about it later. David Cohen Shlita said to me many, many times that there's no question that the umnus that you had really it gave you the skills that you need to put the Rov's derech into practice. That is, being a lawyer actually is extremely helpful for this particular, the discipline, the way you do use words, the way you advocate with words, all of these things, the Chayim Amovis B'Yad HaLashon, all of this is very usable. It seemed to me 3 years after he passed away that something had to be done, and there wasn't anyone to do it. And so I decided, as absurd as it might sound today, but I decided that if there was no one else to do it, I would have to do it. I had never had any experience in writing Svarim or publishing Svarim, so I went about doing what a good lawyer would, is to be able to assemble a team and to construct the different functions that needed to be fulfilled in order to write a sefer, basically to be mafarsim the Rov's derech. And to that, we needed an editor. So the first thing that I learned is I needed an editor. My Hebrew was fine. My English was a lot better. It had to be in proper Hebrew. You cannot write Svarim today that is not proper Hebrew. This is not like 30, 50, 100 years ago. Tzabachan Ivrit, whatever it is, it was fine. It is not fine today. Today, it has to be in proper Hebrew. There is a country in which most of the Gili Torah speak in Hebrew, and it just has to be written in proper Hebrew. And it was my schos that I found with Moshe Hecht, who not only has been my partner in all of these things, I am another Talmud Chacham in his own right, a man who fully understands the power of words. He gets it. He's a thinker out of the box. He's a chevroni. He understands that this is something a little bit different. It requires different kind of handling. And he was on board with the entire project. Has been, in fact, it's been my my privilege to be his partner, or he to be my partner in the mechaber of these Sfarim for the last 16 years. But it started with this idea that it had to be done. His Torah was going to be lost. This is not the way this Torah is taught in the Beis HaMedrash. This is something very, very different. And indeed, I think the Rav always understood, although he was a Rosh Yeshiva in Mir, I think he always understood that this derech does not belong in the Beis HaMedrash because it requires too much chachmas chitzonius, and it really doesn't belong in the Beis HaMedrash. You need too much chachmas chitzonius for it. It can be misused. It can be abused. You can't put the chachmas chitzonius first. It doesn't work. It only works with certain type of people who are already accomplished for whatever reason in chachmas chitzonius. They could relate to what exactly it is that he was doing. So the first thing that I needed to do was to find an editor, which was Moshe Hecht. Then we had to come up with a sefer whose purpose was to be mafasim the Rov's derech. The first sefer, which is Makam Inichu, is intended to do nothing more than mafasim the Rov's derech. If you really want the pure Rov's derech with the way he spoke and the way Makam Inichu is in fact the sefer that was intended to do that. What happened as a result of writing that sefer, and it was very successful. We printed about 10,000 svarim, very, very successful. As a result of that, it became clear that the sefer itself was simply too terse, and that it should be applied to a Pirush on Rashi, which is more like a Shulchan Aruch, which lays things out, in a way that could be more readily understood. It was simply too terse. The Tepuch Ezov is the second sefer that was written on the Rov's derech, but the point of the second sefer is really very different. The first one is to mafarsim the Rov's derech. The second one is to apply the Rov's derech to a pasuk on Chumash on Rashi. And so the second one is laid out like a Shulchan Aruch. Second one is very, very successful. As a matter of fact, at last count, we printed and sold 29,000 svarim of this, received more than 100 michtovim from Choshev Rabbonim with Aoris and Hisafis. It's been an astounding success. It is an attribute in every respect to the Rov's derech that there's been an enormous tvisa and acceptance of this derech. And in regard to that, I have to speak about the third element, which was extremely necessary for these Sfarim to be successful. We had to find someone of the caliber of a Gadol Hador who was prepared to give a true haskama to these Sfarim. Because to start off with, the derech is not the way in which Torah is normally learned in the Beis Medrash. As a matter of fact, when I gave the sefer to Malkiel Kotler, he did give me haskama on the first sefer, but he told me quite frankly that this is not the way he was taught to learn. He said this is not the way he was taught to learn. This is something different, and sort of led me to believe that maybe I should be looking somewhat elsewhere. Although he was very kind and very generous, and he did give haskama to the first sefer, but I was very, very fortunate that because of Moshe Hecht is a Talmud Muvik of a David Cohen Shlita, who was Rosh of Hebron, and everybody knows that in addition to being he himself being a genius, he is very much an out-of-the-box type of Gadol Hador. He is very, very much a very facile mind. He's a man who believes in Chedushim, and my Rabbi Hecht arranged for an interview with him. And he and I had never spoken. He was given the first sefer to give an haskama to, and he asked me why I did it, and I told him the reason that the Rov's derech was in danger of being lost, and that something had to be done about it, and explained to him all the things that we were doing. And I told him, and it was a very emotional moment for me. I told him that I felt that in this regard that I was a yosem, and that I had lost the Rov. I didn't have anyone to replace him. I feel that this enormous responsibility to be mefarsim his derech, and I can't do it alone. I need someone of the stature who will appreciate what the Rov's derech, prepared to take a really good hard look at what I've done and give an haskama. And he was very, very touched, very, very magnanimous about it. He very much likes the derech, very much. He's a big fan of the Rav Zal's derech. Told me many times that he didn't realize that such a great man existed in the United States altogether, such a big gadol, and and at the end of the day, he has given haskamas to all three of my svarim, and he was kind enough to review them from beginning to end. He says in each one of the he reviewed every word, and in fact, I have Horus and the Sofas on each critiques on the entire each of the three svarim, and he's been very, very gracious with his time and his support. I think he truly believes that this is a very, very important project, and he's prepared to give a good deal of his time to help support it. So that's the Reb David Cohen part of it. So how I come to this is b'mokem she'ein Hashem tishtach li'yisish. I came up with a program. Not only that, but of course we had to come up with a program not only to publish, but also to market the Sefer. There's a lot involved in coming up with different avenues of how do you get a Sefer like this in the hands of people who really want to learn it. That in itself was quite an arbit, as they say, and we can thank Rav Moshe Hecht. I think he developed a very, very extraordinary marketing scheme, for each Sefer a little bit different, each one quite successful. But we were able to get it into the hands of people who we believe really want to learn from that Sefer, and that in itself is a great accomplishment. You can print a Sefer, but if you can't get it into the hands of people who will open it up, you're still a failure. The Reb David Cohen, the Rosh Hashiva, said to me, "Your responsibility right now is to find a way to get the Sefer into the hands of people who will open it up and look at it. Then it will sell itself. The derech will sell itself, but you must get people to be able to open it up and actually read the Sefer. That's the kunz." So that's how I came to it. So that's sort of the beginning of the big pasha about the three svarim. I know I rambled a little bit, but why don't you ask me your question, see if there's something that I've missed so far? Good.
So great, you got to a lot of the questions I was going to ask. You covered some of the other ones. Before we move on to Sefer Tafkid HaAdam, the newest Sefer, and it's also appropriate this time of year with Elul, but I first want to get to just some biographical information. If you could tell the listener a little bit about Rav Pessin, I think it's apropos. You mentioned that he has smicha for Moshe Feinstein, but what else can you tell the listener about his biography and his background?
I think it's fair to say that in the 30-odd years in which he was the Maras of Chevron Shas, he really was the de facto Paisik of Monsey. That is, there was no Shaila in Monsey after Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky passed away. There was no Shaila in Monsey that was decided that he didn't in fact decide. As a matter of fact, as some of you may be aware, there was a great scandal, a meat scandal in Monsey, where somebody, a rogue sheikhet, was selling treif meat, and the big shaila as to what to do with the kalim and all of these other things was a big shaila, and the Rav basically is on his deathbed when this shaila is all the Gdolim of Monsey got together to come up with a psak. And as the Rav's son explains it to me, there was only one concept in the entire room. What would the Rav say? The Rav is not here. He's dying in a hospital room. I mean, it was terrible at that time. And what would he say? It was at this great moment when you really needed a super paisik, the man who had paskined every serious shaila for the last 20 years in Monsey. At the moment of greatest trial, he is not there. He is not there. And I thought it was really quite poignant. They did come up with a psak, but if you wanted to know about the godless, they did come up with the psak, and the psak was that they had to break the kalim and all of these things, and they decided that before they actually issued this psak, they would have the son go to the Rav, literally in the hospital room, to see whether he would be maskim, and the Rav said that he will not be maskim under any certain sense. He said it's ki loy de avodah zara. They started arguing with him and saying, but what about this psak and what about that psak? And he kept on shaking his head, no. He was really quite ill at the time. There was no question in my mind if the Rav would have been healthy, and he could have paskin the Shiloh, that there's no question that he would be matir. There was no question in my mind that he would have found a heter, that he would not have allowed the breaking of all those kalim, the things that happened in Monsey. But frankly, he wasn't there. Now, I'm just giving you an example of something to give you a sense of the godless of the men. There were two Rosh Yeshivas. One of them is Rabbi Lichtenstein. He tells that when he was a young man, he and the Patterson Rosh Yeshiva with the two young men, and so they found that there was this great gadol. All you had to do is knock on the door and walk into his house and ask him. They decided that Tuesday afternoon they were going to come with all the shilas that they had over the week, and they were going to talk to him about those shilas, like literally going to the Ur V'Tumim. And this went on for years. These two really outstanding Rosh Yeshivas of the present time, when they were younger, they would literally knock on his door Tuesday afternoon after Mincha, and they would lay out him whatever shilas they had, and he would answer all their problems for the week, and then they would go back, just to give you a sense of what we were dealing with. He was, it's hard to explain, but one of the things that was really extraordinary about him is the precision of his language, which is obviously consistent. He never used an extra word, and I'm not talking about only in Hebrew, and I'm not only talking about in Yiddish, I'm talking about in English. His English was absolute, first rate, and also very terse and concise. He never spoke an added word. Every word was measured and intentional. It was just something about him. You had to experience him. He was quite unique. With me, when he saw that I was interested in a certain aspect of his derech, this is hardly the totality of the man. I mean, he has a whole derech on Shas, things that really beyond my pay grade. But when he saw that I was interested, he actually gave me the svarim which were usable for this purpose. And they're interesting svarim that he gave me. One sefer that he gave me was a sefer called Sefer HaHechel, which is a compilation of every place where Rashi defines a word. It's not comprehensive enough because the professor who did it didn't have the ability, didn't have computerization, but it's certainly a great help. The other one was the Malbim, the Carmel, which the other one he said was interesting with Shamshul Hirsch, but he said you have to be careful with that because he has a different derech, and the derech is based upon a certain understanding of shroshim and family of shroshim, which is a unique derech that doesn't entirely fit in the derech of Rashi. It doesn't. It can be used, it's helpful, but it has to be used quite sparingly. So I was actually, while he was alive, given a lot of the tools, when he saw that I had an interest in these things, a lot of the tools that ultimately would be used to be mefarsim his derech. So that brings me to what? To Tafkid HaAdam?
Yes, I think now we're up to Tafkid HaAdam, and we should turn to the newest sefer, Tafkid HaAdam, which is not a massive sefer. It's about 250 pages.
Yes, that's
the new
right.
sefer, which focuses on Tafkid HaAdam. So, two questions for you. And throughout this, you will, as this one is also a P. Derech, so you'll illustrate this mahalach of Rav Pessin, but also, why did you decide to write a sefer on Tafkid HaAdam, and also you'll illustrate throughout what the sefer is about?
The reason I certainly felt for a very long time, in the context of writing the other svarim, that this was a topic that really needed to be there is no entire sefer which deals with the idea of the purpose of man, the unique purpose of man, how he finds that purpose, how that purpose relates to the general purpose of Am Yisrael and all mankind. There isn't any one sefer that actually brings all of the concepts together and explores and elucidates them. And it's been in my mind for a long, long, long time that at some point in time I would write a sefer called Tafkid HaAdam. That was a long-term project. I'm actually in the middle of a very different sefer called Magal Toiv. The Tapuchei Zov is the application of the Rov's derech on a particular Rashi. When I wrote that sefer, it was very clear to me that a very different sefer has to be written, which is called Magal Toiv, which I'm in the middle of writing, which is alluded to partially in this sefer. That the reason that sefer is Rashi has a certain yesod by which he combines his pirush on each pasuk into a parsha. And in the context of writing Tafkid HaAdam, it became clear to me that a different sefer, which I have entitled Magal Toiv, needs to be written. I'm in the middle of writing that sefer. And after I finished that sefer, it was my intention to write Tafkid HaAdam, because in the context of writing these Sfarim, it became clear to me that this is a topic that keeps on coming up. But there's no one place that explains it, completely explains it, and it was a long-term project. So then, of course, why did I write the Sefer this way? Well, recently I lost my wife of 48 years, Ruthie, who was my Ezer Kenegda and everything. It's a great loss, there's no question about it. And I wanted to do something specifically for her. And you'll notice from the Sefer that normally these Svarim have Zecha Nishmas, all sorts of people and whatever. There's only one Zecha Nishmas in that Sefer. That is to my wife of 48 years, who I loved and cherished. And I wanted to do something specifically for her. So this, what was a long-term project, which I certainly intended to get to, I sort of decided to expedite and write the Sefer L'Zecha Nishmas, my wife. And part of it is, I'll be quite blunt about it, you cannot write these kind of Sfarim, you cannot spend this kind of time as you have to for this kind of thing if you don't have the support of the kind of wife that I had for 48 years. Aside from the idea of the time and effort, but then on top of that, there's a great deal of money that is involved in it. We're talking about huge, I'm not even going to tell you, huge sums of money. I've never taken a penny back on anything that I printed, or all of the money that has been collected has been gone to people who sell it. I have not taken one penny. That's neither for the writing, the printing, the marketing, everything is they're huge expenses. And the reason why I say this is because you need a certain kind of wife that's not only supportive but has pride in her husband, that not only that he's doing this, but is very comfortable and supportive and proud of the fact that he's spending this kind of money on this project. Not everybody is willing to do that, and even in the it takes really an extraordinary kind of person, and I say this, an extraordinary type of person who's willing to make the kind of sacrifice, and it really is an Ezer Kenegda, is being supportive in every way of what you're doing and believes in what you're doing, frankly believes in what we are doing, and you had a partnership in life. And I felt that there was no better way for me to say something extraordinary about that extraordinary person that I was privileged to be married to for 48 years than to write a sefer which was entirely devoted to L'Zecha Nishmas her and the Tafkid HaAdam, which includes, of course, her uniqueness in terms of her Tafkid HaAdam. So it was something that I always intended to do, but it was expedited because of my wife's passing, and that's the reason. And frankly, I've gotten quite a number of letters, even since it's been lots of mechtavim, and some of the things are things that, if I had more time, maybe I would have elaborated on more. There are certain things over there that I might have elaborated, but all the basic concepts, the most important, are there, and then we'll go to the reason why, in fact, I feel that Sefer had to be written. But why it was being done now, this is L'Zecha Nishmas, my dear wife of 48 years, Ruthie. So, okay, so now where do we go from here? I know you're dying to ask me all these questions. So what question did you not ask me yet?
Well, no, I think that's, first of all, that's very nice. L'Zecha Nishmas, a very nice tribute to your wife, and you write that in the Sefer. There's a whole page, as you say, a poem for your wife that you wrote also, in Hebrew, which is, of course, like you're saying, a Sfarim, and we should already mention that you Sfarim, you charge about $10 for the Sfarim. You make sure that they're done. Ramosha Ech did a beautiful job. The covers are really cool covers. The inside, beautiful font, they're really well done, high quality production.
Oh yes.
And Sfarim today, if anyone's familiar with Sfarim today, we're talking $25-$30 a sefer. If it wouldn't be subsidized, so to speak, if you wouldn't be out there and saying you want these Sfarim, you want people to learn these Sfarim, you're not looking to make money on this. This is that, like you said, this is a tribute to your wife, is that she allowed that you're not looking to make money and to get not forget rich on Sfarim, but even just to make a couple dollars back.
I will tell you, is just as far as printing Sfarim, because that's an interesting thing. One of the issues with the actual printing, you'll see that we're talking about major league printing in every respect. We're talking about, first of all, the paper itself. The paper is Biblio 60. It's very, very expensive paper, and the printing is different because of the quality of the paper. In Tapuchei Zov, it's Biblio 60, but they made it very, very thin so that everything could be in one sefer. And the reason is because people don't like to buy sets. If it's too swarm, it's a turnoff. So one of the things that we had to do was we had to arrange it in such a way so that it could all fit into one sefer. Also, you'll see the indices over there. You will see indices by topic. You'll see Sefer Amilim of all the words that, of course, the Rov's, since the Rov's derech is in fact the pirush of the words, the power of the words. You will have a Sefer Milim of every word that is in fact is used in the Sefer, and that's in all three svarim. You will find that because and you also find indexes by topic, and also you will find the table of content, which today is now standard, where you not only have just the general topic, but broken down by subtopics to make it very, very easy. That is part of the writing of this sefer, was to make it user friendly. The Rosh Yeshiva said to me, "You must make this sefer so somebody wants to open it up." Which means that we got the finest choreographer in Israel who does these kind of svarim. We gave him concepts. Each sefer, of course, has a different concept based upon what the sefer is. You'll see with Tapuchei Zov, you'll see with Tafkid HaAdam, there is the motif is Toldas HaAdam, because there is a Gemara that says there's something called Toldas HaAdam. It's the Sifra of Adam Arishon, and that everybody's Tafkid is in it. So you will see on the cover that, and in order to do these things, you need to put quite a number of molds. These things are molds, one upon the. So the more graphic it is, the more molds. Each one of those has 5 molds in order to be able, and it shows. So it's part of the idea is that, it's an attractive cover. The paper is attractive. It's laid out nicely. The indices, all of this costs a great deal of money, but it really shows. It's literally the shach. The shach says that you're supposed to spend money to do the highest quality. And there was a lot of pioneering effort in the writing of these forums, which I hope will become standard for this forum. We in fact experimented with a number of things for the sefer to come out the way it is. That just happens to be an aside in terms of the paper and the construction and the cover and the marketing. All of these things, that there's a lot of pioneering effort that frankly we started out scratch. We literally started out scratch, and it shows. We're able to get the sefer in the hands of people who want to learn the sefer. That's the key. Okay, next.
Okay, let's turn to the sefer. As we said, it's appropriate. It's coming out at all time. How does one find his tafkid? What does that mean? The tafkid of a person. How does one know?
So without giving the whole sefer away, but frankly, I'll give it away. It doesn't matter. The point is that every human being has a unique, exceptional purpose in this world. No two human beings have the same purpose, and the concept is in two memory Chazal, something called Toldas HaAdam. That Adam Arishon was shown a sefer called Toldas HaAdam, and in it is written the tafkid of each and every human being. Every human being has a unique tafkid, and he is charged with the responsibility of fulfilling that tafkid. Now, that tafkid is multi-layered. It is multi-layered. It will evolve over time as a person grows. That is, it's not just one tafkid. It's tafkid layered upon tafkid. It's concatenated, as a word, the Rov's word that he always liked to use. Concatenate, that's his great word. Concatenated, so that they are concatenated. That is, you have a certain tafkid when you're 20, a certain tafkid when you're 30, 40. You have a different tafkid when you're a son, when you're a father, when you're a brother, you're a father, you're a husband, you're a wife. All of these things go into the mix, and in addition, over the entire period of mankind, in fact, there are specific tafkidim that each human being has to fulfill. And if he doesn't fulfill that tafkid, then whatever is left over has to be taken on by someone else. In the world of Kabbalah, that would be called a gilgul. in fact. And in fact, very few of us are really able to do everything that we're supposed to do. But what you have to understand is that Tafkid is something that in fact every day has its own Tafkid. So every day has its own Tafkid. Every different stage in life has its own Tafkid. The relationship with other people are part of a Tafkid. But at the end of the day, the pyramid, there's an apex. There is as the Saba of Kelm said, that there's an apex. These Tafkidim pile onto each other till you hit the pyramid, which is the ultimate Tafkid, which is the ultimate purpose that a human being has, the purpose for which he was put on here. It's an interesting, just a chidah to give you a really just snapshot idea of it. We say mitzafim machshava l'maisa, but we also say eina mitzvah nikra el shem gomer. Well, if Machsarfim Machshav L'maisa, then what difference does it make if you fulfilled it? Says the Chidah, but you didn't fulfill your Tafkid. Yes, it's true that you get the schar, but you haven't fulfilled your Tafkid. And by the way, the same concept you'll see with the Gra, something called din v'cheshbon. The din is a schar, an einish type of dish. What about cheshbon? The cheshbon is whether or not you fulfilled your Tafkid. So you really got judged for two different things. One is good and bad, what you did or didn't do, but the other one is whether you fulfilled your Tafkid. That's the din v'cheshbon. So the first part is basically to explain that every human being has his Tafkid. And one of the reasons I say in the Psicho I wrote it, because in our day we live in a world in which very extraordinary people have had extraordinary careers, and they come to the end of their career and they have this incredible idea that it's time to retire. And it's time to retire and have a good life and go off and see the world and have second houses and do lots of lunches and dinners and socialize and have a good life. They've worked very, very hard. They've raised their children, and now they understand it's time to relax, almost to make out of Olam Haza, Olam Haba. The fact of the matter is that's entirely wrong. It's entirely wrong. Every human being, as a matter of fact, what we really should understand is that if we've developed these talents and skills, that we've gotten to the point where we're ready to retire, let's say, from the practice of law, being a lawyer, a doctor, whatever it is we were doing, those skills are really now the base that we're supposed to use to find our ultimate Tafkid. Quite the contrary. The search for Tafkid does not end. It really, you're now at the batter's box where you can actually start swinging. You may not actually be even close to your Tafkid until you get towards the end of your days. So the bottom line of all of this is that instead for people to understand that when they come to a certain age, that what they really are is transitioning into a different Tafkid, maybe the ultimate Tafkid, they have this incredible idea that it's time to retire and to waste all of the skills and talents that they've developed over a lifetime that really are supposed to be used at that moment in time. That has always disturbed me, and I have felt that this concept really needs correcting. But there's another concept, and it's gotten lost, and I didn't give it as much play in the Sefer as maybe I should have, and that is, if you understand that every human being has unique Tafkid, you treat him differently. He's unique. He's not in the world that I grew up in, Avi Mari, we never used the word schlepper. There were no schleppers. He also always saw the Pintaliyid. Every human being had a unique purpose. He was here to do something that only he was supposed to be able to accomplish. You have to give a certain amount of cover to a person for that. You have to look at him differently. The idea of the cover, HaAdam, changes when you understand that there's no replicant, that he can't just simply be replaced. There's no alienation in this world. The Rebbeinu Shalom created each and of us unique. Having done that, however, he didn't create us hermetically sealed. The Sefer really details two very important things that have to be dealt with. The first is how do you find your Tafkid, and that's derech. And the second is to understand that the Tafkid has to somehow integrate into the Tafkid of the door and the Tafkid of Kol Adam. That is, we don't achieve our Tafkid hermetically sealed. We do it in conjunction and connecting with the rest of Am Yisrael, with the rest of our door, with the rest of our community, with the rest of our family. We don't do this alone. We do have a unique purpose, but that unique purpose must integrate. Okay, so the Sefer, the second half of the Sefer talks about relationships. Something that's entirely missed in the discussion of Tafkid is there is no way in which a person can in fact fulfill the Tafkid, his Tafkid, and integrate with the Tafkid of Kol Adam without establishing the proper relationships. I'm talking about the relationship that the father has to a son, that a Rav has to a Talmud, that Chaverim have. All of these things are the world that we create, that we connect to. This is we connect to that world. And the way the Torah gives us the manner in which we connect to that world, once we understand what those relationships are about, we now start to understand how we take our own Tafkid and we're able to integrate that with the Tafkid Kol Adam. So the second half of the Sefer deals with a subject that is literally not discussed at all. There is no way in which a person can take his own Tafkid and integrate it with that of others without following the relationships that the Torah mandates to us. You see, that's the key. So we just don't do it by deciding to connect. The Torah tells us how we connect. All right? And the way we connect, the way we establish our world, the relationships of that world, that is how we take our unique Tafkid and how we're able to integrate that with the Tafkid of our Dor and Chol Adam. The other things that you will find, and we'll talk about the derech in a second, but things that need to be talked about has how yichus plays into it. Yichus is a very, very important part of it, and there's a long discussion. I mean, yichus, nish yichus, dahin and hair. Well, in fact, yichus is a central part of the idea of Tafkid, that every human being, although he is unique, he is differentiated, but he's differentiated from a shirish that goes back all the way to Avram Avinu, that then goes to the Yud Bei Shvatim, that then goes to the 600,000 neshamas on Har Sinai. Each of us are going to be from the shirish of one of those 600,000 neshamas and has a part of the uniqueness of that neshama. But in each sense, we are not a replicant. The Havdalah, the word Havdalah means to separate it and be somewhat different. If you want an interesting definition of a word, look up the word, the Malbim of Havdalah, and you'll see Havdalah doesn't mean he splits into two. It means it separates, but there's a connection between the two, and you'll see that in Ma'aseh Bereishis. Havdal ben Kodesh l'Chol. There is a connection between the two, but Kodesh and Chol are not the same. They are connected, but there is in fact a differentiation. So the fact of the matter is, there's a long discussion about yichus. We all of us have to trace back to the Shirish HaNeshama. However, each time there's going to be a Havdalah, a differentiation because of the unique Tafkid. But they're not hermetically sealed either. There is a Shirish, and yichus does count. In fact, the Sefer talks about many in Yonim about what the chshivas of yichus is. In fact, that Am Yisrael had to show their Sefer yichus that they were even entitled to Eretz Yisrael. They had to show their Sefer yuchsin. What is that all about? Well, it's all discussed over there. Those are the kind of things that the Sefer talks about, things that we take for granted. What is yichus? How does it play into Tafkid Adam? It's a major cornerstone issue of Tafkid Adam. And then the other major issue is, okay, how does one find one's Tafkid? Okay, this is the big question, the major question. And the answer is the Gra. The Gra in Mishlei gives us the answer. And the Gra tells us that the way in which we found our Tafkid is that we have to receive a derech. Now, the word derech, Rashi defines as bida shenohag boy. That is, it gives us direction. It is the metric by which we are given directional. Every human being, as the Ramchal is given certain attributes, those attributes are key to his Tafkid. He, however, has to be given a derech so he can use those attributes, he can use those kalims to find his way from where he was to where he's supposed to go. And the way he does that is with something called a derech, a unique way in which he analyzes all of the things in front of him, and he comes up with a metric by which he gets directional to which will take him to his ultimate tafkid. Now, in the Gra says in the time of the Nevi'im, you went to a Navi, and the Navi gave you such a derech. And we don't live in the time of the Nevi'im, so the Gra says something extraordinary. He says that the fact of the matter that each of us will get Ruach HaKodesh, that God, in fact, will speak to us. If, in fact, we want to do Ratzon HaBorah, if we are in this world and we say, I truly want to do Ratzon HaBorah, I want to use the world that I've been given to do whatever it is that God intended me to do, you will be given Ruach HaKodesh. Now, this Ruach HaKodesh, somebody, without getting into the depth of it, but you have to understand that the Gra says that there are three types of sichli, and it's discussed in Tapuchei Zoh. Three types. One is seichel machshava and seichel lamaisa, and the third one is the seichel elikim. The first two are of this world. One is the ability to conceptualize. That's a seichel. Then the ability to execute, that's a second seichel. And the third one is seichel elikim. That's God talking to us directly. That we cannot get unless he gives it to us. And he will give it to us if, in fact, we wish to seek to do what it is that Ratzon HaBorah is. And the last item that really is important is what is, in fact, the ultimate goal of all mankind? And the answer is Marber Kovet Shemayim Baaretz. And I will give it to you in simple term. It is for every human being, in whatever circumstances he finds himself, to live, reflect, and propagate the principles of the Borei Olam. Stop. End of story. Eina elo likvoida. It is for his honor. His kavod is to do his rotzin. To do his rotzin is to operate according to his principles. Each and every one of us are being given a unique opportunity, a unique set of circumstances, in order to fulfill the ultimate mandate of mankind, which is to live by, to reflect, and to propagate the principles of the Borei Olam. And where do we find them? We find them in the Torah. That is the ultimate mandate of all mankind. And if you cannot lose sight of that. Once you start with that, then we can talk about how you fulfill that. Where do you get a derech? What circumstances you be given? Why are you unique? What does yichus have to do with it? How do relationships cause you to integrate well? All of those things happen after you understand that the whole mandate of man is eina ela kvidai. Eloi baras hailomai ela lafi kvidai. Beginning and stop. Okay? So the most important thing in the Sefer is to actually explain to people that is the purpose of every human being. Start from the beginning. Then we can talk about what you do to get there. All right?
Yes, I think articulated beautifully. Now, we need to explain the Sefer. How does it go al pi derech Rav Pesach, and if you can give some examples of specifically Tafkid.
I've actually given you quite a few already, but that can be quite, like, for example, the word derech. Let's start with the word derech. So, what does derech mean? Mida shenohag boy. Rashi defines it. Okay, what is a derech? It gets you from here to there. How do you do it? There's a metric. There's a metric. There is a measurement. And that measurement will give you direction. So that when you are faced with anything, with any challenge, with life, with the new day, or there is a metric by which you analyze the new day, you analyze the circumstances in front of you, and it gives you directional. Perfect example. I gave you another one of Havdalah. Another perfect example. Defined according to the way the Rav defines, the way the Malbim defines Havdalah. Define the word Havdalah. Every human being is different from every other human. There's something called Havdalah. What is it? Well, it's differentiation and exceptionalism. But it all comes out of the same shorish, but never an amoeba same like split. It's always different. It's always unique. There's always, as a matter of fact, the most interesting, if those are people who are involved, who know the idea of this concept of stem cells, the idea of stem cells is that, in fact, in the Brias Olam, this is so pronounced that in Brias Olam, that when a cell splits, it never splits exactly the same. It's always splits a little bit different. This idea of Havdalah. And the idea of the stem cells is that the cell actually has the ability to fight the machala, but it's not strong enough. So the idea of the stem cell is to keep on changing the cell so that I accentuate the part of the stem cell that's necessary to deal with the machala. Literally at the heart of Brias Oilam, we see this concept of Havdalah, and literally at the heart of Brias Oilam, we see the idea of the uniqueness of every human being. No human being will exactly be the same as any. Why? Because each one has a unique purpose. So here again, and if we talk about partsuf, we would talk about deya. What is the word deya? Well, if we want to give a good example of deya, how does Rashi define deya? You'd be surprised. He defines it as hikir, to recognize. The deya, the things that I recognize are the things that I think about. I look at a Mona Lisa. Some people will see the great artistry. The other people will say it's worth $20 billion. That is, everybody will look and see something that, what does he recognize? What he recognizes is the metric of the deya, and the deya is a function of his derech. The derech, he applies the deya in order that is the metric by which he determines where he goes from that. So here, perfectly good examples that I'm just giving you. They go on and on and on. If you want to go into the back of the Sefer, you will see all the definitions. You will see how, in fact, the Sefer is constructed according to the derech of the Rav. And one other thing. This is Yerek Val Yaver. One of the principles, and I have to repeat it because it's so important, that the Rav absolutely, you could not say anything if you didn't have a proper makar for it. No bachsvaras with this man. The only thing you were allowed to say was if you could prove it, you could say it. And as a matter of fact, you have 1 second. When I went to Reb David Cohen for Haskam on Tapuchei Zov, he gave me a faher for 3 hours. On this Sefer. 3 hours he gave me a feher on this Sefer. I had sent him 3 hours. Yes, this is not a joke. 3 hours he gave me a feher on the Sefer. He really put me through the coals for 3 hours. Asking me lots and lots of questions. You see horrors in there that really are some of his isofas on the Sefer. But what's interesting is what happened at the end. So I had sent him a letter before having this faher, and I said to him, there are 2 chedushim in the Sefer they're so big chedushim that I don't believe I can put it in the Sefer unless the Rosh Hashiva is maskim. I can't put it in the Sefer. And there were 2 of them. And I wrote it to him and I said, I need the Rosh Hashiva to tell me it's all right to put it in the Sefer, otherwise I'm going to take it out. One of them is probably the biggest chedush in Tapuchei Zav is, what is Rashi's derech? What the golden rule? What is it's pshat, it's drash, it's remes, it's side, it's that, it's more, it's up, it's down, it's sideways. What exactly is his derech? It's not pshat because he sometimes ignores pshat. It's not drash because he ignores it. Sometimes he says drash emsat. Sometimes it's only remes. Sometimes only side. When Moshe Darshan, everything is side. So what is driving his pirish? What is it? So in the Sefer, and I have to tell you, this is an extraordinary chiddush, that Rashi is coming to reconstruct Targum. The halacha Moshe Messinai was that there was something called Targum, that every pasuk in Chumash has a certain catchism, a certain principle of the Torah that is supposed to be attached to that pasuk. That's the Shnei Mikra V'Yechad Targum. Unkelis in his time reconstructed Al Pi Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Elazar. He reconstructed the Targum. This is a Targum that's halacha Moshe Messinai, and Rashi in his day does exactly the same thing. That's exactly what he's doing, and that's what he's coming to do. He's reconstructing Targum. Pshat, Drash, Remes, based on Targum. And I said to the Rosh Hashiva, and there are rayas for it because Rashi's the only one other than Unkel's you can use for Targum. Interestingly enough. All right. Interestingly enough, why only him? The Rosh says you can use many different. Comes the Torah and says, yeah, maybe many you can, but the only one, in fact, that fits is Rashi, not the Ramban, not the Even Ezer, not the others. Why? Because Rashi reconstructs Targum. So I bring rayas for it. It's the biggest chiddush in the sefer, but it's such a chiddush because this is an issue that has challenged all of the great pirushim on Rashi. This is the major, and explains a lot of things. So I said to the Rosh Yeshiva, he actually said we're over. I'm satisfied. Walking out the door, and I said to him, what about the letter and what about this chiddush? He says, what about it? So I said to him, I can't put something like that in a sefer because I don't, without having a great man say that he agrees with it. This is major. So he said to me, he says it in Yiddish. I'll say it in Yiddish because it's much better in Yiddish. We spoke in Yiddish. We didn't speak he doesn't speak English, and my Hebrew is azay and azay. So he said to me, he turns to me and he says to me, Hostein Rav Rosh Yeshiva, der Rav dem Goin dir gesagt, as me mei gunisch sagen an a Makar, und ich seh mehr wie 5.000 Makares in Tapuchesov, und ich kenn mehr sein, es nicht du kein ein Wort in dem Sefer, was hast nicht a Makar. Ich will dir de wasen, as a Mensch hat a Makar, vor was sag, meg alles sagen. Meger alles sagen, and he basically I knew that he was waiting for me to ask this. That's the one topic, the one that I sent him the letter on is the one topic that he didn't talk about it all, didn't question me about it all. He was waiting for me to ask him so he could tell me this important principle that the idea is. Everything you say must have Makar. There's literally in Tapuch Ezev has 5,400 Makaris. There are 18 Makaris from Rashi alone. That is Rashi on other places of Rashi. 1,800 on Rashi. And there are 5,400 in total. And in truth, there is nothing in the Sefer that doesn't have a Makar. There's nothing that one says, and I'm saying it. So the Rosh, one of his, maybe the most important derech that the Rav had is, you must prove it. Prove it to me. If you can't prove it, you can't say it. If you can prove it, you can say anything. And the Rosh Yeshiva was maskim. If you can prove it, if you have a Makar for it, make ma'al zogen. That's what he told me. And that really synopsizes the Rav's derech, the greatness of this great man and his derech.
Amazing story, beautifully said. Also, your haskama on this sefer, I'll read a sample from the haskama of David Kohen on Sefer Tafkid Adam, Nisan Tafshin Pei, he just gave it to you.
Yes.
He says, and you bolded it you have the letter handwritten on the left, and on the right you have the transcription, and it was bolded. V'alvarti ala sefer kula. I went over the whole sefer. V'nechachti lirei shekeshmoi kein hu sefer Tafkid Adam. Hamamid is called Yisoides Tachlis Abriya V'Tachlis Adam. It shows you the purpose of the world and the purpose of man. V'chevasai ba'ilamai v'derech havaida mutelis alav lahamid k'voy shemayim b'briya. Exactly what he said to the person.
Exactly.
He says, "V'hu sefer miyuchid b'minoi." It's a sefer miyuchin in its way. Hamaroimim es hamusagim by Yisoid shel tachas adam avedasa v'Yisoid nesinas hatayra am amul of avedasa. He says, "Rabbi Mechaber Shlita kedark b'svar avakoyim Muhammad as a sefer al Yisoidis and Amonim." He put it on Yisoidis and proper, basically sources and Mekayris dvarim v'usasim v'meirim inayim v'samchilev. And by the way, like I said before, Ravarti a sefer kuloi. He writes that he read the whole thing.
And then he did.
But based on what you've been saying, that makes sense. But not always, as you know, as we all know. Many Askamas don't
I have
read
to tell you one quick story about this. Very quick story. When I was in Eretz Yisrael a year ago, I told the Rosh Yeshiva that I felt, first of all, I wanted to write the Sefer L'Zeicha Nishmas, but I also told him that I felt that there was a strong need for such a Sefer, and I told him why. He received the manuscript of this Sefer on Erev Pesach. He sees the manuscript, he goes through it on Chol Hamoed, and on Motzei Pesach, I have all of his Oris and his Sofas and that Haskama.
Amazing.
He told me he felt that this is an enormously important sefer, and he stopped what he was doing. He told me he was going to deal with it as soon as he got the draft.
To end, he says, "V'yia sefer hazeh." The sefer will be l'tei'eles, a purpose u'lebracha and a bracha l'chol mevakesh. For anyone who's searching derech aliyah shel eirachem l'mayla maska, anyone looking for an aliyah in their way of life. Yiskabel ba'ava, it should be accepted with love. Ubechiba, ba'olam ha'torah kederech sheniskabel esfar v'koydim. It says be'ezer Hashem yamshich b'derech aliyah lechadash u'lesgadel b'torah l'schos ha'rabim b'chiburi and efloim mitoich briyas nemono u'menuchas ha'nefesh ha'simcha. And he ended off. So beautiful Haskama, really.
And I want to end with to tell the audience that I feel I have been very blessed in life. Besides the Gashmias and family and all of that, I've been found worthy, I suppose, of having a relationship with three great people. One was Avi Mari. That's a long story. That was the first. The second was the Rav Zal for 25 years. And once he passed away, I've had the schus of having this extraordinary relationship with Reb David Cohen. He didn't know me. I told him I was a Yossam. I literally told him I was a Yossam. I needed somebody to help me. I was afraid that the Rov's Torah was going to die with him, and I needed help. And I just came to him as one Jew with another. And he's embraced the whole project. He's embraced the people. He's been enthusiastic. He's mechazik. I have to tell you, I cannot tell you to what extent he has been giving of his time, his very valuable time. When he came to America for the Beis Medrash, the BMG Sefer, the first one. The first one that they have on where they have in a stadium or something. Don't they have
Adir Torah?
When he came here, he really had a very tight schedule. But the one thing that he did do was he brought the manuscripts for Magal Tov that's not finished, but it's finished up to Vayikra. He brought the manuscripts with his Ha'aris to give Rabbi Hecht. He wanted to make sure that he didn't miss the opportunity to give him the all the horror. So we're really into Bamidbar, and I already have his horrors up through the end of Vayikra. So and this is it's extraordinary that he's willing to do this for me. It's just he really believes in what we're doing. He believes in this derech. He enjoys the derech. He understands what it can do, and he believes in it. He's extremely supportive of it. You know, the Rav gave us a very powerful tool, and if you use it correctly, methodically, and religiously, it's oike harim. And that's what you'll see from all of these svarim.
Amazing. I will link to this forum in the show notes. Tafkid HaAdam, as we said, is really appropriate this time of year.
Yes.
I'll link to Tipuch Chizav, Makamenichu, all this farm. You can buy in this farm store. Like I said, as you said, they have the beautiful cover design, the beautiful inside, everything we talked about, these farm, and they're around $10, I think. Very,
so.
Yeah. So very affordable for those interested. And thank you, Reb Gili, for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you for listening.